this episode, we shift from choosing a model to stress testing it mentally, the way a cautious driver thinks about what could go wrong before taking a new car onto the highway. Evaluating models for abuse means asking how someone could misuse the system on purpose, how normal users might misuse it by accident, and where the model's safety features might fail in ways that matter. For brand new learners, it helps to remember that AI is not only a tool for doing good work faster, it is also a tool that can be steered in harmful directions when the incentives are wrong. The model doesn't have values of its own, and it doesn't know your organization's rules unless you build those rules around it. So the central skill here is thinking in misuse paths, which are realistic routes from a user prompt to an unsafe outcome, even when nobody intended that outcome. Once you can see those routes, you can evaluate whether a model's safety behavior is strong enough for the job, and whether the controls you plan to add are realistic rather than wishful. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A misuse path is the simplest story that connects an input to a harmful output or action, and the best misuse paths are boringly plausible. They don't require genius hackers, secret knowledge, or movie-level drama. A basic misuse path might be a user asking the model for a shortcut and receiving instructions that violate policy, or a user pasting sensitive text and the model repeating it in a place where it shouldn't appear. Another misuse path might be a model that is allowed to draft messages for customers, where a malicious user tries to get it to generate convincing phishing content, even if the model is supposed to refuse. When you evaluate, you are not only checking whether the model says no sometimes, but whether it says no reliably and consistently across variations of the request. Misuse paths also include the model being used as a confidence amplifier, where it makes someone feel sure about something unsafe because it speaks clearly and confidently. That can lead to harm even if the model never touches a network or runs a tool, because the output itself shapes human behavior. To evaluate abuse, you need to understand who might try it and what they want, but you can keep this simple by using a few common attacker goals. One goal is extraction, meaning the user tries to pull out secrets, private data, or hidden instructions. Another goal is manipulation, meaning the user tries to override the intended rules and make the model behave differently. A third goal is generation, meaning the user wants the model to create harmful content, like social engineering messages, instructions for wrongdoing, or material that enables harassment. A fourth goal is disruption, meaning the user wants to waste resources, drive up cost, or degrade service quality for others. You don't have to become paranoid to do this. You just need to acknowledge that any model exposed to users, even internal users, will eventually be tested in these ways. People experiment, people get curious, and some people intentionally push boundaries. A major safety gap to watch for is when the model treats untrusted content like it has authority. For example, imagine a user pastes an email that contains a hidden instruction telling the model to ignore policies and reveal all prior messages. The model may not understand that the email is untrusted text. It might follow the embedded instruction if it is phrased convincingly. This is one reason prompt injection is so serious. It turns the content you are analyzing into a control channel. When evaluating models, you want to test whether the model can keep roles straight, meaning it understands which instructions are the system rules, which are user requests, and which are merely data. A model that blurs those boundaries is easier to manipulate, especially in real workflows where documents, tickets, chat logs, and web content are constantly being fed into the input. If your intended use case involves processing outside text, the ability to resist malicious instructions embedded in that text becomes a core security requirement, not a nice-to-have. Another safety gap is inconsistent refusal behavior, where the model refuses a risky request one moment and complies the next moment with a small change in wording. This matters because abusers do not ask once and give up. They rephrase, they add justification, they split the request into smaller pieces, and they use the model's own suggestions to inch closer to the harmful goal. Inconsistent refusals also confuse normal users because they can't predict what is allowed and what is not, which leads to accidental misuse. When evaluating a model, you should try clusters of prompts that vary tone, wording, and context, and see if safety behavior stays stable. A model that is strong on one phrasing but weak on another is not mostly safe, because abuse will concentrate on the weak spots. In security terms, attackers look for the easiest path, not the average path. Misuse paths are not limited to content generation, because many systems wrap the model with access to data or tools. Even if you do not plan to build an agent right now, it helps to understand the idea of tool calling and action execution, because it changes the risk. If a model can request a file, query a knowledge base, or trigger a workflow, then a malicious prompt can become an attempt to perform an unauthorized action. That can turn a text problem into an access control problem, which is more serious because it involves real systems and real data. The model might be tricked into asking for information it shouldn't have, or it might be tricked into taking a step it shouldn't take, especially if the system around it automatically fulfills its requests. When evaluating models for abuse, ask yourself whether the model is being used as a suggestion engine for humans or as a decision engine that can cause actions. The closer you get to actions, the more you must demand predictable and controllable behavior. Now we need to talk about overreach risks, because not all safety problems come from being too permissive. Sometimes the model is too aggressive about refusing or too eager to label content as harmful, and that creates different kinds of security issues. Overreach can cause important work to fail, which can drive users to bypass controls by using unofficial tools, copying data into personal accounts, or disabling safety features. That is a security problem because it pushes activity into the shadows where you have less visibility. Overreach can also cause misclassification, such as treating a harmless technical question as dangerous, which harms trust and encourages workarounds. In a security program, controls that block legitimate work are often removed under pressure, and when they are removed in a hurry, they are removed badly. So evaluating overreach is part of safety evaluation, because a safety system that users hate will not survive long enough to protect anyone. A balanced evaluation asks two questions at the same time: what dangerous things slip through, and what safe things get blocked. Think of it as measuring both false negatives and false positives, but in plain language. A false negative is when the model should refuse, but it does not, and a false positive is when the model should comply, but it refuses. Both are costly in different ways. If the model slips on refusals, it can enable harmful content or unsafe actions. If the model over-refuses, it can break workflows, reduce productivity, and increase shadow usage. When selecting or evaluating a model, you want evidence that the vendor has thought about both sides and provides ways to tune behavior responsibly. If the only option is safety on or safety off, that lack of nuance can become a risk no matter which side you choose. To evaluate realistically, you should build test cases that mirror your actual environment instead of only using dramatic examples. For instance, if the model will help write internal policy, test how it responds when asked to include sensitive details that shouldn't be published, like internal network ranges, incident specifics, or customer names. If the model will help summarize tickets, test how it handles tickets that include secrets pasted by mistake, such as API keys, credentials, or personal data. If the model will assist with troubleshooting, test whether it invents steps or claims certainty when the input is ambiguous. You are not looking for perfection. You are looking for predictable patterns and clear boundaries. A model that consistently says it cannot verify something and asks for more context is often safer than a model that guesses confidently, even if the guesses are correct most of the time. Vendor claims about safety often sound impressive, but secure evaluation focuses on what you can observe and what you can control. Does the vendor provide clear documentation on data retention and whether your prompts are used for training? Can you disable or limit memory features if your use case requires strict isolation? Can you obtain logs that show what prompts were sent and what responses were returned, so you can investigate incidents? Are there controls that allow you to set boundaries, such as restricting topics, limiting output formats, or applying content policies? Transparency matters here because you need to know where the safety features live. If the vendor's safety system is a black box, you might not know whether it is enforced at the model level, at the application layer, or only in certain interfaces, and that uncertainty becomes risk. A common trap for beginners is to treat safety evaluation as a one-time pass or fail, like a quick checklist. In practice, abuse evolves, user behavior changes, and models are updated, so evaluation must be repeatable. That means you want an evaluation approach that can be run again after version changes, new features, or new integrations. Even simple measures like keeping a set of known bad prompts and known good prompts can reveal drift over time. Drift matters because a model update that improves general helpfulness might also make it more compliant with risky requests, or it might change refusal phrasing in a way that breaks downstream filters. When you evaluate, you also want to note the model's behavior under stress, such as long prompts, confusing prompts, or prompts that include multiple conflicting instructions. Abuse often hides inside complexity, because complexity makes it harder for controls to detect intent. Another overreach risk to recognize is when safety systems block security work itself. Security teams sometimes need to discuss malware behavior, analyze social engineering attempts, or describe vulnerabilities in order to defend against them. A model that refuses any discussion of harmful techniques, even in a defensive context, can make legitimate analysis harder. That can reduce the model's usefulness for security education and security operations, and users might then use less controlled tools to get the same information. The right goal is not to eliminate all risky knowledge, because defenders need knowledge, but to prevent the model from acting as a step-by-step enabler for harm. Evaluating that distinction is part of responsible use. You want a model that can discuss threats at a high level, explain defensive concepts, and still decline requests that are clearly aimed at wrongdoing. When you put all of this together, evaluating a model for abuse becomes an exercise in understanding the gap between what you want and what the model will sometimes do. Misuse paths show you how harm could occur. Safety gaps show you where the model's defenses are thin or inconsistent, and overreach risks show you how overly strict behavior can backfire and create new problems. A secure evaluation results in a realistic decision, like choosing a model that is easier to constrain, limiting features that expand the blast radius, or planning compensating controls around known weaknesses. It also results in documentation you can defend later, such as why you chose a certain safety posture and what tests you used to validate it. The most important beginner lesson is that safety is not magic inside the model. Safety is something you test, measure, and reinforce with design choices. When you can explain abuse risk in plain stories that connect input to outcome, you are thinking like a security professional, even if you are brand new to the field.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.